Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be going through the topic of the retail inventory method basics. Okay, so we're just going through the basics of the retail inventory method. So just to start, what is the retail inventory method? Well, it is an inventory method generally used by retailers. Okay, that's kind of where it gets the name from, right? That uses a company's retail sales prices to determine the cost of its ending inventory. Okay, so basically, it is much easier for retailers to keep track of the sales prices of all their inventory as opposed to the cost of all their inventory. Okay, so this method, it relies on a discernible cost pattern between the sales prices of a company's inventory and the inventory's cost. And the relationship between the cost and the sales price is called the cost to retail ratio. Okay, basically what we're doing in this method is that because of the fact that it's easier for companies to actually just compile what they're selling their inventory for as opposed to keeping track of each inventory's individual cost, what we do is that we compile all of the inventory at its sales prices, and then we try to determine, okay, what is the ratio, what is the discernible cost pattern of the sales price to the cost, okay? That's the cost to retail ratio. We try to determine the relationship between the cost and the sales price, and then we use that cost to retail ratio to convert back to the actual ending inventory, its cost. Okay, so we're basically starting at sales prices, and then we're multiplying by the cost to retail ratio to get to cost, okay? It's a little weird the way it sounds at first, but once you see a couple of problems, it will make sense, okay? So there's 4 types of the retail inventory method covered in this class. The conventional method, also called the LCM, the lower of cost or market method, the cost method, the LIFO retail method, and the dollar value LIFO retail method. Okay, these are all going to be covered in partially in this video to a certain extent, but mostly in 2 other videos. There'll be one on the conventional method and the cost method, and then one on the LIFO retail method, and then one on the dollar value LIFO method. Okay. So basically, you might need to know all of these methods, you might not, okay? It just depends on your professor. So you need to make sure which ones you need to know. Basically, pretty much all the professors, you need to know the first method, the second method, and the third method. The only one that is generally up for grabs as to whether or not you have to know it is this last one, the dollar value LIFO method. Some professors require you to know it, some don't, okay? But generally the first 3 you are required to know, okay? So most of the stuff you will be required to know, okay? So how does the retail inventory method work? Well, companies first compile their beginning inventory, purchases, sales revenue, and some other items at both cost and retail prices. Okay, all the cost items are compiled in one column, and then all the retail prices are compiled in another column. So basically we have 2 columns. One is cost and one is retail prices. Okay, and we just compile all the items going down in a list at these different things, at cost and retail. Okay. Second, companies add their purchases to the beginning inventory to derive the retail value of the goods available for sale. Third, companies subtract the sales value from the retail value of the goods available, the sales revenue from the retail value of the goods available for sale to arrive at the ending inventory at retail prices. Then once we have ending inventory at retail prices, companies determine the cost to retail ratio. And the last step is they take the ending inventory, and they multiply ending inventory retail prices by the cost to retail ratio to arrive at the ending inventory at cost. Okay, so that's basically the steps. And again, we'll see examples of that, and it'll make more sense once we see concrete examples. Okay, before we actually go into anything else, we want to talk about this thing about the cost to retail ratio. I call it like the line. Okay, it might be referred to in that way sometimes. That's kind of the way I like to think of it. Okay, and basically it's basically the cost of goods available for sale divided by the retail value of goods available for sale, okay? And so basically, if we have an example here, if the cost of beginning inventory was $100 and the cost of purchases was $200, while the retail value was $300 and $500 respectively, the cost to retail ratio would be 300 over 800, okay? Because we have cost over basically the retail value, okay? And this is both the goods available for sale, right? And so goods available for sale on the top would be 200 plus 100, right? Beginning inventory plus purchases would be goods available for sale. And then if the retail value of those 2 items was 300 plus 500, we have 300 over 800, which is 0.375. Okay, meaning this cost to retail ratio means basically, okay, the cost is 37.5% of the retail value of the goods. Okay, so if we determine the retail value of the goods, then we can just determine, okay, well, the cost must be 37.5% of the retail value. So we can kind of back into the actual cost of the inventory. Okay, so that's the first page. Next, we're going to go through a very quick example. This is a very sort of easy example just to get our hands on the situation and try to figure out what's going on. Okay, so we have XYZ company, and they have cost and retail columns. This is what it looks like, okay, when we compile all these items at cost and retail. Okay, so we have beginning inventory, and then we have our purchases. Then we have our goods available for sale. Okay, like we said before, when we're calculating our cost to retail ratio, we're looking at the cost of the goods available for sale, and we're looking at the retail value of the goods available for sale. Okay, so the cost of the goods available for sale will be 15. The retail value is 20. That would mean the cost to retail ratio is 15 over 20, or 75%, like 0.75 basically as a decimal. Okay, then what we do, once we've determined this, is we subtract out ending sales revenue from the retail value, right? The retail value of the goods available for sale, that's the 20,000. Then we get ending inventory at retail prices. Okay, so we're almost there. The last step is just to multiply by 0.75, because again, like we said, this is ending inventory at retail prices, right? And our cost on average is 75% of our retail prices. Okay, so if our cost is 75% of our retail prices, that means that the cost must be 9,000 in this case, because it's 12,000 times 0.75. Okay, so that's the basic idea of what we're doing. We're compiling these things at cost and retail. Okay, then we're determining our cost to retail ratio. All right, after we've done that, we kind of do a couple other calculations. We determine ending inventory at retail, then we multiply by the cost to retail ratio, and then that gives us our ending inventory at cost. Okay, very important that that's at cost, right? Okay, because that's what we need to put on the balance sheet. On the balance sheet, we can't put ending inventory at retail prices. That's not allowed under GAAP. We have to put it at its cost. Okay, and this is an estimate of the cost, right? All right. Now we have a couple other things to cover very quickly in this video before we go to other topics and other lessons, other videos that we'll have. So markups and markdowns. A markup is an increase beyond the initial retail price of a product. And then we also have something called a markup cancellation. That's a decrease in the price of a product a retailer had marked up. So basically a markup is when you increase the price of the product. A markup cancellation is when you decrease the price of the product after you had already marked it up. Okay. These ones are always above the line, meaning they're always above the cost to retail ratio line. Okay, so they're always up here somewhere. They're always up here above. This is basically the line, right? Because that's where we're determining the cost to retail ratio. They're above this. They're above this cost to retail ratio. Okay, and they're only included in the retail column. Okay, so we only include those items in the actual retail column. We do not include them in the cost column. Okay. Which is important when we're doing our calculations. We'll see how that works, okay? Markdown is a decrease of the original sales price, the retail price of the product. So again, that's a decrease. A markdown cancellation is an increase in the price of a product that a retailer had marked down. So that's an increase, which is a cancellation of the prior decrease, okay? The markdowns can be below or above the line when determining the cost to retail ratio, depending on the method used. And these are only included in the retail column. This is the same as markups. So we can see the difference between markup and markdowns. Markup is always above the line, whereas markdown could be above the line or it could be below the line, okay? It could be included in the cost to retail ratio. It could be excluded from the cost to retail ratio. It just depends on the method we're using, which we have 4 methods, okay? And we'll look at all those methods in a couple other videos, okay? But just something to be aware of now. This becomes sort of a big deal when we're doing the retail inventory method, so make sure that you kind of almost need to memorize for some of these things. You almost need to memorize, okay, this goes above the cost to retail ratio, this goes below the cost to retail ratio. Because the cost to retail ratio is what is basically telling us how much percent the cost is of the retail price, right? And so this is a very important number because this is going to help us ultimately determine our ending inventory at cost, okay, once we've done all our other calculations in the retail column, okay? Our last page here, you'll see, is just this huge chart, okay? And so it says a comprehensive list of items related to the retail inventory method, meaning that this has basically every single item you could possibly see from the retail inventory method, okay? It will be shown here, okay? And what we have is the first one we have our items. We're not going to go through every single one, but we'll go through a couple just to see what is going on. So we first have our items, then we have, is the item included in the cost column? Okay, so again, what does that mean? It means we have the cost and the retail columns here, right? Cost, retail. Is it included in the cost column? And then the next one is included in the retail column, okay? Then, so is included in the retail column, is included the cost column, and then is it above or below the line, right? This is the cost to retail ratio. Cost to retail ratio. Okay, so is it above, is it below? Okay, so for example, we have something like freight costs. Is included in the cost column? Yes. Is included in the retail column? No. And then is it above or below the line? It's above the line. Okay, and we can go through like that for every single item. I don't know if we necessarily need to do that. The one thing we do want to point out is that there are these ones that have these little stars here. And so basically, if sales, we'll see this. I'm just going to make a note of this very quickly. But for sales discounts and employee discounts, they can get a little weird. So if sales are recorded gross, these amounts are ignored. If the sales are recorded net of discounts, we will use these amounts. We will look at an example of this later. Okay, so just to remember that this note is pretty important and it does make an impact on our calculations. Again, it probably doesn't make a ton of sense right now, but we will go through problems and see what that means. Okay, then finally, the markdown cancellation, as we were kind of saying before, it could go above or below the line. It just depends, okay, on the method we're using, and we'll see that in other videos, okay? So that's basically just a chart you can always refer back to and say, okay, I'm working on these problems. Where does this go? In the cost column, in the retail column, yes, no, and then does it go above or below the line, right? Just so it's easy and it's simple to see where these items go, okay? So that's the end of this relatively short, just basics video. There will be some follow-up videos for the different methods, okay?